Hello, my name is Victoria Cornish. I'm pattern maker, designer, teacher. For the last 3 years I've been specializing in what is called zero waste design and pattern making. If you've never heard of it before, it's a style of pattern making where you take your fabric and you try to accommodate the whole width and length of fabric to cut and create your pattern, which means you have close to none or none at all of cuts of fabric left. Comparing to traditional industry standard where about 50% of fabric goes into the waste, zero waste pattern making aims to zero or maximum about 5% of small leftovers. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through one of my favorite and most popular patterns, which is harem pants. Similar to what I'm wearing now, they look something like that. They look almost like a skirt from a distance. They have elastic waist, which is very comfortable. You can make them from heavier or lighter fabrics, and depending on that, they'll be of a different style. You can have or have no pockets. This is the pattern that is kind of moldable, where you can decide which parts of it you want to change and design your own. Depending on your size, your measurements, and your fabric width, you will have either zero or some leftovers of the fabric. But the leftovers you will have, they will be mostly reusable squares or rectangles that are easily accommodated for other projects. This pattern proved to be so versatile that I dedicated the whole blog post to it. If you want to read more what you can create after watching this pattern, you can visit the link hopefully shown on the screen right now and read more. A variation we will create today will be from a very light silk fabric. It will be a summer version, and believe it or not, it will be transformable into a top. So you can wear what we're gonna create today, you can either wear as pants or as a top. Yeah, I know, sounds crazy, but let's get started. First of all, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of the pattern. As you probably can guess, I did not invent it. I don't think in modern world we invent anything new, we just reimagine what already been done before us. So the pattern I'm showing you today is based on traditional Chinese patterns of men's pants. As you can imagine, in old days, fabric was a very precious material. So when anything was cut, or like when clothes were made, people tried to use like completely the whole piece of fabric, and they tried not to waste a single piece, which was understandable. So this pattern is based on 3 squares like that, 2 for the legs and 1 for the gust. So the leg squares were folded in half like that, 1 and 2, creating 2 tubes. So the tube openings will go connected together like that. And then the gusset folded on a diagonal and attached in between, which gives you a nice and wide pants with leg openings here and your waist there, where you connect the casing for the elastic or the wraparound. What I did, I've sort of connected all the 3 squares into one long strip. So if you look closer, the square 1, square 2, square 3. In real life, if it's for real measurements, they most likely will not be squares, but more like rectangles. So it is a square in the middle and 2 kind of rectangles on the sides. What you do, you fold the middle kind of part on a diagonal like that. This is one leg, you fold it into a tube to be attached there, turn around, another leg, you fold into a tube to be attached there, and this is the basis of your pants. You've got leg openings and you've got your waist. So here we're gonna attach a casing for waist elastic. Now let's calculate our measurements. To create these pants, you need to do 2 measurements. One is your pants, your fabric width, and to calculate your width, what you need to measure, you measure from the mid hip, sort of roughly from here, down all the way down to the ankle bone. Add 3 centimeters to this measurement, and to that measurement, like mid hip to ankle bone plus 3 centimeters, you add another 20-25 centimeters to create the waist elastic. This is your fabric width. As a general, I've made quite a lot of these pants for different sizes, and generally the pants length will be something between 80 to 90 centimeters, which gives, if you add, let's take the maximum 90 centimeters, if you add about 25 to that, your fabric widths can be 100 to 125. The next measurement you need is your fabric length. To calculate the length, you need to measure your hip circumference. You measure your hips. You add 4 to 5 centimeters ease allowance for ease of movement. Let's say my hips are 96. I add 4 centimeters for ease of movement. I get 100. Now this 100, like your hips plus ease, double the amount. So from 100, I get 200 centimeters, which is 2 meters. And to that amount, I add another 15 centimeters for the freedom of movement. So my measurement will be 2 meters and 15 centimeters fabric length to create this pants. Yours might be totally different. To recap all that, we need 2 measurements, right? One is fabric width. To calculate the width, you measure your pants length from mid-hip to ankle bone, add seam allowance and add another 20-25 centimeters for the belt. That's your fabric width. And fabric length is calculated the next way. You will see the measurements on the screen just to make it easier. But fabric length is calculated this following way. You take your hip circumference, add ease, which is about 4 or 5 centimeters, then double that amount altogether, and add another 15 centimeters for the freedom of movement. I'm a visual person, so before I cut the fabric, I wanted to show you a visual of how your fabric layout will look like. I did a scale 1 to 5 layout here, just to show you. This is my pants body. So this is my fabric width, which is calculated from my hip circumference, and this is my pants length plus seam allowance. And the strip at the top will be used to cut all the other pattern pieces. So the first most important one is the belt. To calculate your belt, well, the width you can choose whichever you prefer. I prefer my belt width around 20 centimeters. That will give me enough for the seam allowance to fold a little bit for the elastic, and I use showing elastic for, as you can see on my pants, for the rest of the belt. To calculate your belt length, you simply divide your fabric in half and add a little bit for the seam allowance. I'd say about 2 centimeters. This is your fabric, your belt length. But yeah, then you still have left with a strip of fabric here, which you can use up to whatever you desire. You can create like what I'm going to do. I'm going to do to finish my leg openings with another elastic. So I will cut 2 strips to create casings for the leg elastics. Then I will have another strip of fabric here to do a neckline opening, because my pants, as you remember, will be transformable into a top. If you don't want to transform your pants into a top, if let's say if you're using heavier fabric, which is not really appropriate, you can simply have wider casings for the leg elastics. And then I'm going to cut 2 pockets from the rest of the fabric. So my layout will be totally zero waste. But if let's say you decide you don't want the pockets for your pants, you will be left with a little rectangle here, which probably could be used for other projects. If let's say you decide you don't even want the leg opening elastics, like pants like mine I'm wearing here, they simply have an opening like that, which create more like a skirt-like pattern look. You wouldn't need any extra fabric to create that. So then you will be left with this rectangle of fabric. So as you can see, this pattern is really moldable. You can either use the whole amount of fabric, or you can leave something but create the design you like. Another thing to consider, let's say if your fabric width is more than what you calculated you need for the pants, this will be your layout, and this will be the extra strip of fabric left if you need to downsize your fabric widths. And the last thing, if let's say your fabric is like mine, is only 100 centimeters wide, which is 1 meter, is just over a yard, but you're a taller person, so your pants body will be cut like that, and you will have like a small 10 centimeter or less strip of fabric left at the top. Generally, I would try to find fabric up to the width that you need and cut it that way. But if you're adventurous and you want to try something from the fabric you already have, this is the layout you potentially can have. So that will be your pants body. Then the only thing to consider, you'd have to add extra to the length of your fabric to create the belt and the pockets if you want them, and the leg elastic casings again if you want them. So your fabric length will be calculated on a slightly different formula. You will use the formula that I gave you before, but then you would have to add 40 to 50 centimeters for the belt, plus another 10-15 centimeters for the leg casing, leg opening casings. These are just some things to consider when you are going to create the design. Before I go ahead and cut my fabric, I wanted to give you a few more details to consider when you design your own pants. I'm gonna shift my camera down like that. So this is my layout. When I mark the fabric, the first thing I do, I mark the pants body, and I cut the strip that is going to be used for all the other pattern pieces away. But I don't cut the pieces itself yet. I explain to you why. Now, to make sure that the leg hem opening casings are of the right length, I need to fold my pattern first, because depending on your own measurements, these will be different. It's not as easily calculated as the belt width. The belt width is simply half of the leg, half of your pants body plus seam allowance, which is like roughly like that on my scale 1 to 5. So I can probably just cut the belt away. The rest I leave uncut. As you remember, to fold that into pants, what I need to do, I need to do a few marks. I fold my fabric in half and place a mark there. So divided that in half. Then I fold each half into half again and place another 2 little marks there. I marked the squares, and then I marked a few more points, connection points, with red and blue pen. One connection point is a quarter mark on one side and the edge on the other side, and then a quarter mark here and the edge on the opposite side. So when you fold your pattern, you need to connect blue point with the blue point, and that will be your leg opening this side. And then you connect this red point with that red point, and that will be your leg opening on the other side. Like that. This will be your waist, because this is a quarter, this is a quarter, and this is a quarter. All together there will be exactly half of your fabric, which is your belt is. And because depending on your side, on your hip circumference, your leg opening might be narrower or wider. That's why before we connect the leg, now once we cut the fabric, we can pin it and measure the amount of fabric, the length of fabric needed to do the casing for the leg opening. And only then, when I made sure this is the right length, I mark it and cut it from the fabric. Let's recap again how you fold the fabric. This is your pants body. I marked it into 4 equal parts. Quarter, 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 and quarter. And you can see there's a mark. There's a quarter mark, half, and another quarter mark. And I did exactly same on the other side. Then I marked 2 connection points. One, you mark a quarter from this side. Once you fold it, will get connected with the edge on the other side. So this quarter will get connected to that edge, like that. And that quarter on the other side will get connected to that edge. So one connection point, these 2, and another connection point, these 2. Now, once we got all our connection points, the last thing we need to mark is the neckline opening. This is to be able to wear the pants as a top. So what we're gonna do, when we fold our diagonal, this will be our pants. So this is bottom there is the waist. These are the leg openings. When you wear it as a top, your waist elastic remains your waist, your leg openings becomes your armholes, and here we need to cut the neckline. So to mark the neckline, I fold this diagonal in half to find my middle. I mark the middle. And from here, I basically measure how wide I want my opening to be. I prefer mine to be not too wide, so sort of there, which would measure probably around 33-35 centimeters from one shoulder to another. So I'm gonna mark on both sides, and what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to cut from this point to that point, just creating a slit like that, which we will treat later on with either bias binding or the some fabric piece that we will have left, and that will become our neckline opening. Now I'm going to cut my fabric. I've got beautiful silk crepe fabric here, just really light and perfect for the summer pants. It's actually can be folded into a tiny piece like that, which will make it perfect fabric to have either the pants or the top. I cut my pants body, which is a long strip of fabric. I marked my quarters. I cut my belt piece, and I have another rectangle which I haven't marked and cut yet until I put together my pants body, so I can measure how long I need the pieces for the leg opening. Another thing I just wanted to mention briefly, that zero waist sometimes comes with a few other considerations. Like zero waist can be in different forms and shapes. One thing is to eliminate your fabric waste at the start of the process, which is very important. Another thing is to think which materials you use. Let's say I go by the following rule. If, let's say, the fabric I'm using is a combo of man-made and natural fibers, or it's completely man-made fibers like polyester, acrylic, nylon or something like that, I would probably just use all-purpose normal polyester thread. But this time I'm using 100% cotton. And with my natural fabrics, I like to use 100% natural threads. So I'm going to be using Kuttenman 100% cotton thread of a matching color. Unfortunately, I will have to use shirring elastic and regular elastic for the belt, which I can't get right now in natural option, but it's a tiny piece of considering the general scale. Now, to start with, I'm going to fold my fabric first. So from quarter on one side to the quarter on the other side, I get this diagonal. And then I fold my legs. Now, to stitch the side seams, I like to use the welt seam, flat felt seam, sorry. If you've never used it before, it's amazing flat seam. It will create you a top stitching on the outside of the fabric, but it's nice and flat, and when you wear these pants, it just creates a nicer flow, in my opinion. So to create a flat felt seam, I usually start by connecting the fabric with overlapping. So this is my waist edge. I like one wedge to be protruding. I make a seam about 1.2 centimeters from the edge, and then I fold that over and get another stitching. What I mean here, I connect two fabrics when one edge is offset against another to about 0.6 centimeters. So there is 0.6, 0.6 and 1.2 all together, and do a stitch. Then you open the fabric up and fold the longer edge over the shorter one and do another stitching. So on the outside, your flat felt seam will look like that. And now inside, you'll have two stitches, two parallel lines of stitches. I've connected my pants body piece together. As you can see, this is my waistline. These are my leg openings, 1 and 2 at the bottom. So what I can do now, as I said, we need to measure my leg opening widths. And I will measure and cut the casings to insert elastic here. I have marked my leg opening casings, and it will come up to that point. They are a bit longer than I expected, so these I'm going to cut in half like that, and that will be my leg casing for one leg and the other. And this is all the fabric I have left after I've cut everything I need. So that is not enough to have, it's just enough to have one pocket, but because I'm going to make these pants transformable into a top, I need something to treat the neckline opening. So out of that fabric, I'm going to use that square to make bias binding, just to treat the neckline. And once I finish the bias binding, I'll measure how long it is. It should be just enough to do the slit for the neckline opening. So I'm gonna cut my slit for the neckline after I finish my bias binding, when I know how long it should be. And I'm going to use that last piece as a front decoration for the top. Now connected my belt. So this is my belt. And two leg opening pieces. I'm going to start by connecting the leg opening pieces. Very simple technique. I'm going to match the corner with the seam. Stitch about 1 centimeter from the edge, fold over, fold the edge, and you will have a casing and stitch here. When I'm gonna do the stitch on the other side, I'm gonna leave a couple of centimeters gap to insert my elastic. I finished my leg opening. As I said, I left a little gap here to insert the elastic. I will close that with a sewing machine stitching once the elastic is in. The legs are done, and I'm going to connect the belt. I like to connect the belt also with a flat felt seam so that I don't have to use the overlock. It's exactly the same seam we used to stitch the sides. I've attached the belt tube. I'm going to leave it to the very end to do the casing for the elastic at the edge and the lines of shirring elastic stitching every 1.5 centimeters. But for now, I'm going to transform it into a top first. I will mark my neckline, and I'm going to transform that square into continuous bias binding. To do so, mark the diagonal, cut, and stitch into a shape like that, with just with a simple seam, and press it open. Okay, I marked the strip ahead into 3 equal parts of 4 centimeters each, connected them with the offset, so leaving an edge here and leaving an edge here. So there's the connection seam. So all you need to do now is cut that into a continuous strip. And all together I have a bias binding. Let's measure it, because that will determine how wide my neckline opening can be. That is about 77 centimeters, which is plenty to create nice and wide neckline opening. I even probably going to shorten it a little bit. This is the little strip that I said I'm going to use as a decorative piece. I just literally pressed the edges inside. I like to mark the front on my top when I'm going to wear it, so I'm going to pin it like that and top stitch. And the last thing I'm going to do is to treat the opening, which I've cut here, with a bias binding. My pants are finished. I promised I will show you how they're on in a minute, but I did have a little piece of waist left. This is off cut of the bias binding that was a little bit too long for my neckline, and I've got plenty of these, which are thread leftovers from the seams, machine seams. And the last thing, because my fabric initially was a little bit longer than I needed to 2 meters and 15 centimeters to create the pants, and I had 2 meters and 35 centimeters. I had a strip of fabric left at the end, and I created like a nice oversized scrunchie to wear together with my pants. So out of 2 meters and 35 centimeters of fabric, which was 1 meter wide, this is the only waist that's left. And this is the aim of zero waste pattern making and designing, is to include the design into the pattern making process as such. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Bye for now.